they can't just invest in tech. They have to put they have to put some investment into the people. And I think in doing so, we should almost just think about it almost like a basic benefit of working at the organization, almost like insurance, or other benefits, where it's like, okay, I would expect this to be there and it needs to be there. And it should be something that really helps people, that retention. I mean, I do understand that there are opportunities out there that people want to pursue to better themselves, better their career. But I think a lot of security professionals, the reasons that they leave sometimes, maybe it's a $10,000 raise or something, but I think the real reason behind it a lot of times is they don't feel like they don't feel like they're growing or developing, and so that really is the root.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of 401 Access Denied. I'm the host of the episode. I'm Joseph Carson, Chief Security Scientist and Advisory CISO at Delinea. And it's a pleasure to be here with a guest who is awesome and comes back to the show today. So, Kevin, welcome to the show. I'm really excited about the conversation. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and the things that you get up to in the industry.
Yeah. Hey, Joe. Hey, everybody. Kevin Haynes, CEO of Cybrary, and interested in all things to do with cyber and helping get millions of people involved and helping the cause, if you will.
Absolutely, and this is a big problem in the world. I mean, there's so much going on in the security industry, and threats and problems. And I think one of the things, one of the topics I think is really important in the industry is the skills gap, and how organizations can make sure that they can future-proof their hiring process, because organizations are competing for the very few resources out there, and there's millions of unfilled jobs. Organizations are looking for highly skilled individuals. So I think for me, it's an area that we need to address. We need to find a way to quickly get people up to speed on the skills. So Kevin, can you tell me a bit about what you're seeing in the industry, when it comes to the skills gap? What organizations, what challenges they face, what are some of their top priorities, and how they can start addressing this area?
Yeah. As you look at different publications, you hear or read that exactly what you said. There are millions of vacancies, if you will, or job postings that don't have the people to fill them. And depending on which publication you pick up, the numbers are a little different, but they're all big. They're all bad. And my personal experience with it was in just the pain that I felt in a prior life trying to hire hundreds of, cybersecurity professionals a year. And just, they weren't there. I mean, and so, as you described it, kind of fishing in a really small pond of resources. Yep. I think the first thing, Joe, for me, and which is why I joined Cybrary, because I feel like this is critical. The first thing is, we can't just keep fishing in the same pond. Like that's got to change. And so we really have to be much more inclusive and get, I think, millions more people involved in this, interested in this, engaged in this, having curiosity about this, and seeing it as a destination for their purpose. But also a great opportunity for them from a career perspective, because they really are.
Absolutely.
These are high. They're not just. I mean, these are high paying jobs, really good jobs, and they also have the benefit of doing things to really help help the economy, help organizations, help people, and so. For me, it starts there. How do we go get millions and millions and millions more people involved and curious and learning, and then give them sort of the things that allow them to have some early success, some early wins, because this is a field where, man, there's a lot. You can get overwhelmed pretty quickly and feel like, well, I'll never learn all this stuff. Like, it's so deep and it's so nuanced, and So we need to help people along the way to find early wins and to get to success, and continue to invest in people sort of once they're in it, right? Because this is a field where I don't know if there are others like this really, where
It's
your
continuous
learning
learning.
never ends. It can't
It
ever
never stops.
it
Yeah,
can
it never
never
stops.
stop, you know? And so, and so we got to get people who, when I think about this, I think about some early wins and, get people something where they can feel success. A lot of times that can be a certification, their first certification, because it's something that they can work for. It's kind of a path, right?
It
It's
becomes
laid out.
it's theirs for their lifetime career. But when you
It
get
is, and
certifications,
it's sort of like
it's yeah.
repeatable, predictable a little
Mhm.
bit in terms of
Mhm.
how you do that. And then you feel good, right? Because you accomplish something,
Mhm.
you get it. And then now you feel like, okay, I can start to like be part of this. And,
Mhm.
but from there, to me, the certs aren't sufficient because you really have to have people to solve the problem. You have to have people on keyboard that know what they're doing. And so, that is really the skills, capability, and knowledge piece
Mhm.
of it. So I think we have to do all those things,
Mhm.
and do that at a pretty fast pace.
Mhm.
And I've been sort of walking around the last couple of years with this thought in my mind, which is, when I first got involved in cybersecurity, 8, 10 years ago, it felt to me like we just had to have we had to have the tech in place, because
Mhm.
if you don't have the fundamental tech in place and you can't see, you don't have
Yeah.
visibility, then there's no really way you're going to prevent, detect, or respond to threats without having the basic tech in place to give you the visibility.
Correct.
But I feel like a lot of organizations now, they have done that. They have the basic tech in place.
Mhm.
Um, and what they really need to do is if you really sat down and thought about, okay, for the next dollar or pound that I spend,
Mhm.
what's going to what's going to reduce the most risk in my organization?
Absolutely.
And is it buying another layer of tech, or is it investing in my team to be equipped and enabled? I would submit that at this stage, it's investing in the team, investing in the
Mhm.
people, to have the skills and capability.
Which unfortunately for many organizations, that's the smallest part of their budget, is
Yeah,
investing in people, which
yeah,
is a bit of a, for me, it's always okay. When you're even looking at your acquisition of security solutions and purchasing, the training is always the smallest part of the budget. The certification is always the smallest part. You look to maybe get some consultants in to get you up and running, but you fail to invest correctly in the people. And a lot of that ends up coming afterwards if you fail to get the metrics and measurements that you want to. But I absolutely agree. I completely agree with you that we definitely need diversity, because in our industry today, it used to be very much an IT industry that had a very much security, technical expertise and specialization. But that's
right.
no longer the case today. Uh, you know, all of the things we look at, all of the incidents that affect organizations, it's a business response, it's a business impact. So therefore, we need to make sure that one is that we need all parts of the business working together. We need legal experts. We need communication experts, PR experts. We need financial experts. That all of those need to be basically functional as part of this whole industry as well. So we
Yeah,
need better communication, better transparency, and even the point where I've seen a lot of people entering into the market, into the security industry from even psychology backgrounds, because we need to understand the human aspect. How do we effectively make the right things happen? So, absolutely diversity, and a lot of that means absolutely it's not looking at the youth coming into the industry, but it's also reskilling existing, very experienced people that
yeah,
have been doing maybe careers in other industries or other sectors, that we need to make this industry something that they want to be participating. And sometimes we make it scary for them because
yeah,
we only the news that you see on TV is always the doom and gloom, the fear, and we need to make it something that is an attractive industry for people to want to have their career into.
yeah.
So
I
that's
agree,
another
Joe.
area.
It's like it's hard sometimes to give someone a chance.
Hmm.
Like when you say coming from, maybe they don't have the, sort of the exact background or skill set.
Hmm.
Um, because when you give somebody a chance in the security world, like how do you do that in a way that, is
Hmm.
responsible and, that you can minimize the risk?
Hmm.
Because I mean, you have to be really thoughtful about putting somebody into a position that they just don't know. And as we said, this is deep
Yeah,
and nuanced. Um,
yeah.
but I think we have to find ways to give those people that have those sort of non-traditional sort of backgrounds. We've got to
Hmm.
give them a chance. And
Absolutely.
you know, I've found that some of those skill sets that you talk about coming from different backgrounds, even like
Mhm.
a therapist, like you
Yeah.
know, think about like an incident response consultant maybe,
Hmm.
um, who has to know how to connect to people and like with tons of empathy, right?
Yeah.
Because if an incident response person is working with a customer, there's probably a bad day, right?
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot of emotions. And like having sort of a therapy background might be pretty useful.
Actually,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, I've done a lot of incident response in my past, and it's the most stress. That's for me. I think it's the event that leads to a lot of burnout.
yeah,
Because people they're working 24/7. You need to make sure that they are. One of the things I remember in incident response is that the project managers, those who were kind of supporting the team, was that they were just ready to get you anything that you needed. If you needed a pillow just to
yeah,
rest for a bit, you needed a chocolate bar, you needed, anything that you needed to make you comfortable during that period of time, because it is very stressful. People are worried, people are fearful, people are worried for their job, people are worried that people could die as a result of those
yeah,
incidents.
100%.
So you absolutely need people. I always remember I used to have one person on my team who just was a comedian, just made me laugh all the time.
Yeah,
And in the worst situations, when you're dealing with those major incidents, just a simple comment from him was enough to just bring everybody into laughter and just like, okay, let's just
yeah,
reset, let's move forward, and let's
yeah.
keep the calm, let's keep the momentum, let's keep the joy in it.
That's a
Um,
fabulous sort of way. I think something that we're sort of saying,
mhm,
which is how do we find those skill sets, bring them in, give
mhm,
them the opportunity to really shine at what they're naturally good at, and then learn sort of like be soaked in the cybersecurity sort of you know like projects or work
yep,
and absorb that over time. So
mhm,
my guess is that person that was that you said that was really funny and sort of was able to
yeah.
sort of bring levity over time. They probably really learned a lot about security. They're probably really capable security
That
persons too, right?
that person, the person on my team, I mean, he was in my team for like 10 years and was just kind of the heart of the team at the end, and became very, very, I mean, one of the things my requirements always was a person who had the willingness to learn.
Yeah,
I didn't care if they had whatever technical experience in the background, as long as they were willing to learn, because I could always teach people those skills.
right.
What I couldn't teach people was their personality. I can't change people's personality. And it was always about making sure that somebody was basically just interested, passionate, wanted to learn something new. And that was my basic criteria.
Yeah,
That person could be coming from a linguistics background. They could be coming from, as you say, a therapist, or they could be coming from an economy background. But as long as they basically wanted to learn, you can always train a technical piece.
yeah,
And that person became hugely successful. Was very, very became one of the top team members in the team. I mean, they weren't set out to be management because that wasn't the direction, but they came be very, very good technically.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we need to do that a lot more and be better at identifying that,
mhm,
and then also be willing, because I've done similar things and had similar experiences
mhm,
where I thought that somebody with a pretty non-traditional sort of background, let's give them a shot, and
mhm,
you you'll be. I mean, a lot of people will be pretty uncomfortable with that, right?
mhm,
Or not think it's a good idea. Um, and so you sort of have to be open minded that hey, it may not work, but it
mhm,
it might it might work great. And so to just be willing to give it a shot, but also like do it in a responsible way, because
mhm,
you don't want to throw somebody into something where they're going to either create harm for an organization, or damage sort of their own reputation
mhm,
in the process. So you need to think about how do you do that in a way that you can bring people along in a responsible way, but yet like
mhm.
let them soak in it, right? Enough to kind of really, really, really
Absolutely.
just get immersed and up to speed.
You just reminded me of an important thing as well. One of the areas I remember bringing on, that was my main criteria of hiring, was just getting the personality, and the rest that I could train. And I remember bringing on people, and after a while, you're monitoring their metrics, the measurements that you're looking for. And it's always a case of that sometimes you look back, and I remember there's certain cases where sometimes I had to learn things. When I onboarded somebody years ago, and they appeared to be doing really well, but when you looked at the metrics, they were just underperforming. And you're going, how is this the case? And what I ended up doing was every now and again, I created what was called as a buddy system, a mentor system. So I could actually have somebody go and sit with them and, just maybe one day a month and just to understand about, how they're performing. And when I did that, ultimately I ended up finding that actually it was my fault in the training process. They weren't simply at the end of their task, they were simply missing a checkbox. And that checkbox was important for our metrics measurements. But they were actually, when we corrected the training, and we went back and we made sure that that was something that was missed, they end up becoming a top performer. And it was all
Yeah.
basically just simple. So sometimes we had to make sure, and it's sometimes we had to look back at our training and make sure that we're continually improving it. Because if we assume, if we make assumptions that things have been a certain way for a long time, and we don't kind of go back and really look at them and improve them and make sure that we're actually evaluating our training methods as well, which is important, is
Yeah.
that we're not going to get the best out of people. And I think one of the things you mentioned earlier, in our industry, this is an industry where you don't stop learning. And I think that's where when you onboard people, that this is not a checkbox, is not onboarding. Onboarding is part of the continuous. It's a continuous onboarding. In this industry, you don't stop. Once after a month of training, is that you don't do the checkbox and that person's now ready. You
Good to
have
go.
to invest. Yeah, you have to keep investing in them. You have to keep improving them because only the more you invest in people, the more they become loyal, the
Yeah.
more they enjoy the job, the more they stick around. And that's the problem. Is I look at the industry in some places, you do see that many of the issues that we have right now, as you said, fishing in the same pool, is retention in the industry is really bad. You get people who spend 6 months here, and rather than being successful within the same company, they just jump between companies. So
Yeah.
it's a battle of if people 6 months going to one company and going to another company. We want to progress. We want to get as much value out of people. You have to invest in them. You have to
Yeah.
make sure that they're happy doing what
It's
they're
funny,
doing.
Joe. Because Cybrary, it's our mission in life
Mm-hmm.
to help here, and I will tell you that I'm often surprised when talking to some of our customers,
Mm-hmm.
particularly the individuals,
Mm-hmm.
because Cybrary has this two-sided. We help organizations that need to train their employees. Um, but we also help individuals who want to grow professionally and get
Mm-hmm.
into the space. And those individuals, I'm oftentimes really surprised talking to them when I hear things like, "I'm not sure," or "I don't think my manager will invest in my training."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of blown away, and I know that's true. I know that
Yep.
exists, but I'm still kind of shocked and blown away by it. In that, like back to the point of why would you hire you, why would you hire somebody, a security professional or somebody who's transitioning, a workforce
Mm-hmm.
transformation from maybe an IT person to a security person? Why would you do that if you're not going to, continue to invest in them? I mean, you might as well just outsource and pray.
Yeah,
Um,
and
you know,
that's what we've seen. I mean, that's one of the areas in the skills gap that we have in this industry is a lot of it's been outsourced to service providers in order to provide that temporary, and ultimately what happens is the more organization outsourcing is not a bad thing, but
oh,
you have to keep it in a balance. You have to keep the, and it's a fine balance. The more you outsource, the more you become less knowledgeable about your own business. The
right.
more you become less visible about what could potentially the risks are. So it's always a fine balance. You can, some things you outsource because it might be very specialized and you might not get those highly specialized skills. But you definitely want to make sure that you want to retain people, you want to invest in them. And for me, I think even in the industry now, that organizations need to be looking somewhere between 30% of a person's time, not even just financially, but time. Because there's one thing I've seen is people. getting the investment into, maybe a training course a year, but they don't get the time to
Yeah.
do it, or they have to do it in their own time. So for me, I think, organizations, one day a week should be invested into continuous learning. 2 days a week, even better. I think the organizations that's going to get the most benefit is those who invest, 30 to 50% of a person's time into continuous learning. And it must be, of course, you must be looking at, that there has to be a return back to the business. So it must be always related to the job, or, not, directly 100%, but it can be kind of somewhat, related in that area of field. So I think, for organizations, I think that is where they get the most value out of employees, because when somebody learns something to be more efficient or better at doing that job or better at doing that specific skill, they do things quicker, they do things better, more consistent. And I think that ultimately reduces the risk for many organizations. So, and it also gets the best out of the solutions they invest into, as well, because then that person actually knows it much better, can actually get that investment of technology or processes to the most value or most optimum that organizations get out of it.
Yeah.
So it's always a fine balance.
Yeah. Going back to something you said about, like the sort of the attributes that you look for in hiring,
Mhm.
um, and that sort of passion to learn and curiosity,
Yeah.
it's, I always really loved when people, in interviews would ask about
Mhm.
like, what is your training, you know, what do you offer in terms of training benefits? Because that was sort of a key, like,
Mhm.
for me to say, oh, this person really is, they really care about that. And I wish more people would, would inquire about that, because, you want to be around, you want to join a company that, where you can work with people that you're going to learn
Mhm.
from, respect and learn from,
Yep.
and a company that's going to invest in you. Because at the end of the day, I think, um, I do believe that organizations are
Mhm.
starting to realize that they can't just invest in tech. They have to
No.
put, they have to put some investment into in the people. And I think in doing so, we should almost just think about it almost like a basic benefit of working at
Mhm.
the organization, almost like insurance, or other benefits, where it's like,
Yep.
okay, I would expect this to be there, and it needs to be there. And, and it should be something that really helps people, that retention. I
Mhm.
mean, I do understand that there are, you know, there are opportunities out there that people want to pursue to better
Mhm.
themselves, better their career. But I think a lot of security professionals, the reasons that they leave sometimes, um, maybe it's a $10,000 raise or something, but
Mhm.
I think the real reason behind it a lot of times is they don't feel like the company, they don't feel like they're growing, or developing, and
And
so that
it's a
really is the root.
reason I left my last job.
Yeah,
so so that I didn't feel I was being invested in. That I felt that I became stagnant. That the company was happy me staying in that position and doing that job, and didn't want me kind of moving around. And to be honest, if I look back at my career, most of the jobs I've left is because I was being kind of held in doing the position where I wanted to grow myself. I wanted to keep learning.
yeah,
So you're absolutely. I think that's fundamentally one thing that I did though in the last few years, because I always felt that one of was a reason a few years ago, or actually it's quite a long time, maybe 7, 8 years ago, when I changed jobs, was that I was being forced to relocate
mm,
into another country, city, and I
yeah,
didn't want to do that. So that was one of the reasons why I was not being invested in,
yeah,
to kind of the kind of continuous learning piece. And one of the things I thought, when the pandemic happened and people were then more willing to work remotely, I thought that was going to accelerate more organizations getting more people, because they were going to be more flexible in wherever that person lived. Because I always thought that a lot of the hiring issues were people wanted them close to the office, so it was mostly focused around high competitive states, whether it being San Francisco or California, or whether
right,
it being places like in New York, where they were just competing for very fewer resources, but there were so many very skilled people across the country and across the world.
right,
And I thought the pandemic might have opened that up more. And actually, maybe it's been the reverse. Actually, maybe people seeing the opportunity to go and change jobs because of that and work for other companies that are not in their location. So
Yeah.
That was my expectations, but it hasn't been. What have you seen with remote working and organizations being a bit more flexible that way?
Well, I do think that, I mean, I do see exactly that, which is organizations, for the most part, had to figure out how to sort of make remote
Mm-hmm.
work. And and I will tell you, I was running a pretty large security operations center when this happened. And if you would have asked me like 2 weeks before, hey, do you think you can just send your, do all this stuff remotely? I would have said maybe sometime way in the, like, yeah, maybe if we, but probably not for a long time. And then literally, we went from, everybody sitting in a room with, all the monitors and everything that you would envision of a SOC. We went from that to like over the weekend, like everybody working from home.
Yeah.
Uh, and so we figured it out, and it was pretty surprising. I think that we could figure it out. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's some longer term things that we're still trying to
Mm-hmm.
understand about that, because there is something to be said. Like when people are sort of, there's an established culture, and there's established people, and they already know the process procedures, and sort of now it's just you're doing that from a different place. But I do think about new people coming in, and how do
Yeah.
you sort of like, um, there is something still that I think we need to sort of figure out about the operating system,
Mm-hmm.
that we sort of is sort of missing with full remote all the time. But I do think it has allowed most organizations to sort of cast the net wider,
Yes.
um, and find talent, open the aperture, if you will, to talent, and
Mm-hmm.
be able to get some talent, that they possibly wouldn't have before. Like if your mindset is, all right, I need to see this person in this seat,
Mm-hmm.
in this, in this building, in this stock or
Yeah.
whatever, then that's, you're limited to people who can drive in from, and so that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a pretty small aperture. But if it's literally like, I don't need that anymore, the
Mm-hmm.
aperture is pretty wide. So I think that's helpful. But at the same time, we're not necessarily creating, back to where we started. We're not really
Yeah.
have the sufficient numbers of people anywhere.
Yeah, and
Um,
it needs to be a hybrid approach. You need to have a hybrid model, and I think that's where you get the flexibility dynamics, so that
yes.
you give the person the choice, and but you have to find a ways to bring them together when they need to. So there has to be, whether it being certain, where we've seen that the shared working office, where we might have these, basically shared kind of central hubs where organizations, when they can come together, and
Right.
it doesn't necessarily mean to be an hour commute to work, but it could be one day a week. You might go to a specific city, or you might fly somewhere. So I
Right.
think looking at, those, it might be a longer commute to the office for some people,
Yeah.
but it's not as frequent. It's not as often. You
Yeah.
go to do that social side of things. Because you're absolutely correct. Because for me, I've been remote working for a long time. And with the pandemic side of things, where I used to meet people mostly at conferences and events,
Yeah.
that's where my social activity with my colleagues was going to an event and speaking and engaging with them there. To the point where the last 2 years, I haven't met my colleagues face to face,
Yeah.
and I can't imagine. I've been fortunate enough that I've been with the company for a long time, and I'm fortunate enough to meet many of my colleagues before that. But a lot of them in the past year or two, I have never met,
Yeah.
and I think meeting people in person is definitely, is another benefit, I think,
Yeah.
of a job that you do in a career. So there has to be that engagement. So absolutely, I don't think it's going to be one or the other. I think it will be a hybrid model, and organizations need to be flexible. They need
Yeah.
to, make sure that that's,
Well,
a
I think it'll
choice.
help with some of the inclusiveness too, Joe.
Hmm.
Like, which is, I think one of the hard things about cyber is, it can feel pretty unapproachable, very specialized, and
Hmm.
kind of, you know, um, hard to, like, or intimidating to kind of break in. So I think the remote actually may help in that way, because it's, the flexibility. Like, in order to do this,
Hmm.
you have to be more flexible. You just have to.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget. It wasn't that long ago. It was probably about 3 years ago, that I had reached out to somebody about an opportunity, a cybersecurity opportunity, and it was one of those ones where it was like they had a particular skill set that wasn't. It was sort of non-traditional, but I thought it would just really help balance the team.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like they would be somebody, they're a really sort of just, they just love learning, like continuous learner, like just, super motivated. So I felt like this would be a great opportunity that they could really help the team with something they're already good at. And it would allow them to just really learn cyber, learn a lot, but like be
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by it and just learn it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a female. I reached out to her and said, look, we talked about this, and I think we have something that could really get you into the space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we talked for about 10 minutes, and she said, I just don't know that that this is the right
Mm-hmm.
space. I don't know if this is the right thing for me. I said, it's perfect. What are you talking about? And she said, I was never in the military. I said, what are you talking about? And she's like, I don't think this is for me. I was never in the military. And I said, why do you say that? And she said, well, I read about this job posting, and sort of the stuff out there. It seems like I really I wouldn't have need to be in the military. And I said, oh my God, it was just like a light bulb. Like, so this is a person who's reading, stuff out there and
Oh,
thinking that this is not, she can't be in our industry because she wasn't in the military. And it's like, man, we really have to think about that. And I know why some of the jargon exists,
mm-hmm.
and sort of the roots of it. But I do think in order to cast the net really widely and get millions of people, we're going to have to be thinking about how we do that, right? Because we're just going to have to open the aperture.
So you brought up an important point, which is a bit of an issue I have with our industry, is we need to redo job descriptions. Because that is probably the fear factor for many people, and it is basically when we put the skills and requirements to the hiring process, we're very technically focused, but and what happens is the hiring process just look at it and go, well, we don't know how to change that into something that's actually English or language, communicated in a way. So they just basically take our technical jargon and just post that as a job description.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when people look at that in the industry, I spoke to so many peers that are just like fed up with looking at those really horrible written job descriptions that is full of acronyms that sometimes is asking for more years experience in a technology that has never been around that long,
Yeah.
and looking for certifications that need you to have 5 to 10 years experience. And we want to be inclusive. I think that we have to make a way that our job descriptions are sometimes like ULIS license agreements, and people that confuses people, it scares people away. And if we want to get it, we have to change the way that we advertise the positions. I think that's a big challenge. And every time my peers, I see them sharing some of the posts on social media and just like,
Yeah.
and it's always a scary thought. And I think if there's one area that we can be better at that could take immediate effect, it's for all of those, anyone who's listening to the podcast right now, if you're in the process or your job is responsible for doing job descriptions, you need to completely simplify it
Yeah.
to make it
We're
more
all guilty
attractive.
of it.
Because
I mean, we're all
yeah,
guilty of it. I'm guilty as charged.
absolutely, years ago that was what we did, because we
Yeah.
were looking for technical people, but now
Yeah.
we need to be inclusive.
And it's sort of like like it's a little bit of a little bit lazy because it's
Hmm.
a little bit of a sort of a way to filter,
Yeah.
uh, LinkedIn sort of searches and things like that. Because even, like a lot of times we don't take the time to help recruiters really understand what it is we're
Hmm.
actually looking for. And so we kind of use some of those things as a way to say, okay, we'll go look for this, right? Um, and it's sort of a way, I think, a lazy way to kind of try to save time on the interviewing process,
Yeah.
because we probably all experience, the I mean, let's face it, like back to the skills problem. You probably have to talk, sort of cast the net out to 100 people to find one,
Hmm. Yep.
right? Because we're all fishing in the same pond.
Hmm.
So I think we do it for those reasons. But you're absolutely right. If you're out there listening to this, like we do have to be better, and
Yeah.
all of us, include myself.
Pick
And
one thing that you really mandatory need, but don't put so much. It's a, it's you can't have somebody 10 years experience in penetration testing and having network certifications and
Yes.
the list just goes on and on. If there's something that you mandatory need for that position, just ask the one thing. The rest we can always retrain.
Plug
We
it
can
in,
always
fill it
train
in.
that person.
Right. Yeah, back to your point,
Get yeah.
like maybe one of the things we should be most insistent
Mm,
upon is like that curiosity and just hunger to learn. Because, like you
mhm.
said, if you have the one thing that we really need and you have that, like the rest will take care of itself generally.
Exactly. So I have another question for you. Really interesting because it's been a big thing, especially in very experienced people in the industry, as well as imposter syndrome as well. Is people who's in the industry feel sometimes that because I mean even myself, there's so much to learn. I can never know everything.
Yeah.
And I've been benefiting that I know quite a bit. I know the person I can go to and ask a question who can help me with those answers.
Yeah.
But people find that a lot of imposter syndrome just because they get stuck in feeling that their kind of process or they are skilled in a certain place but not in another place. What's your thoughts around that? How can people make sure that they can get feel included in the industry, because it can be quite also aggressive and social. A lot of people
Yeah.
out there are very negate people very quickly, and I think I would rather our industry be more welcoming,
Yeah.
and providing people with the ways to feel that they can be open about I don't know the answer to that, but I'm willing to learn it, rather
I
than
think
all of a sudden.
I think you hit on a really key thing, which is just growth minded.
Yeah.
And I think it's, one thing that maybe a mindset, which
Mm,
is maybe the mindset piece you have to have is that it's okay not like nobody's gonna know all this stuff. Like I don't care who
mhm,
you are. And the other thing that's kind of cool about our industry that I thought of, like for new people coming in, because
mhm.
there's some industries where it's like, all right, unless you were here at the beginning, of time, like you'll never catch up with the best, right? Because they were here at the beginning.
Yep.
Cyber's like, nah, a new person can come in because if you were here at the beginning of time, you probably like, that doesn't help you too much. I mean, maybe a little bit in some of the foundational,
Yeah,
but it's like
not too many companies using COBOL these days. So
exactly like so it's like it changes so fast. It's almost an advantage for the new person because they're
you're
so
absolutely
like
right.
a lot of times people do get complacent in their learning.
Hmm.
And so, like, if you've been in it for 10 years, maybe you're more complacent than the newcomer who's like just so hungry to learn. So, like, give them a year, they may be like, so it's an advantage. So, I'd say first is just the mindset of
Hmm.
don't be afraid to just dive in, right?
Hmm.
Um, and yes, you're going to find those closed-minded people and the sort of the know-it-alls,
Hmm.
but you're also going to find the people who generally like just want to give back to the community. That's one of the cool things
Okay.
about the cyber community is there's so many people who just do it for the purpose. Like they would do it whether they're getting paid or not,
Hmm.
because they love it and generally they want to help people. Like there's
Yeah.
massive amount of people like that. So like go find them. And if you find the closed-minded ones or the ones that are sort of not fun to be
Hmm.
around, like don't be around them. Like go, there's plenty of ones that want to help people.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, there's a lot of folks that are sort of more senior,
Hmm.
and they generally start to understand that their biggest contribution to the industry going forward is going to be through others.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
find those people who are wired that way, and just be really curious, right?
Hmm.
Ask tons of questions, and like I said, I think for us as that are in the industry already, we should really encourage that.
Absolutely. I
Great
completely agree.
questions are a gift.
Absolutely. Completely agree. And I think you made a great point is that, you know, technology changes really fast and people can basically get up to speed very quickly. And therefore it's always about continuous learning. It's about finding and there's so many amazing people in the industry that have, I've benefited even still today. I call them friends and mentors that I go to just for advice and just for direction sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's always getting that reassuring. And so, because I one of the things, I used to be a perfectionist, and it was one of my kind of good skills, but it was also a bad skill. It was one of those things that can be, good way that you will always, learn the detail, the very
Yeah.
fine detail. But it was also a weakness in my area where I wouldn't share. I wasn't sharing with others. And, and I got to the point where one of my mentors in the past said to me, it's like you have to learn that you have to share. Sharing the knowledge early allows you to make sure you get the feedback. And it's one thing that I've changed in my entire career, and it's changed my career completely.
Mm.
Where it's made that, yes, I see, for example, the value of being open, mentoring others. And I thought, when I started doing that, when I started mentoring others in the industry to try and get inclusive, giving them opportunities to try and help them with speaking engagements, or to introduce them to others who might be able to help them in certain fields, whether they're interested in getting into incident response, or they wanted to do malware analysis, and you're getting, here's a person who's the best in that field, and they'll provide you with some direction and knowledge. For me, I thought it was going to be something that I would be giving back, but in the same return, I have learned so much from doing that as well. So
Yeah.
when you find in that position, is that you start learning from them. They start becoming, well, I thought it was, about doing a good thing, but actually in the return, it's actually very valuable back. You start learning about, new ideas and being creative. And I think that's where absolutely we all as an industry have to work together, because
Yeah.
this is something that you can never win alone. And I think this is where it's all about a community. It's all about finding, the best of the community, and to really make that facilitated, maybe, make it. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's about bringing thought leaders together to share their experiences and to get those ideas and thoughts out to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So, so
Yeah.
it's great having you on the show. And this has been, I think this is a really important topic. And I think, for me, I think we really need to look for those creative ideas about how to be inclusive, how to open up, organizations to really look and beyond, to really redefine onboarding, to being continuous learning, to continuous invest in people.
Yeah. If
It's
you're
definitely
that
something we
manager,
need to.
Joe, if you're that manager of a
Yeah.
security team that's out there,
Hmm.
and you've got those open roles, and you're just not sleeping well at night because you've
Hmm.
got and let's face it, a lot of these things are they're round the clock.
Yep.
Three shifts, and you've got to find that person who's capable at that third shift. And or you had somebody who was really key leave,
Hmm.
and you're just sort of facing this huge gap, and everybody else is now sort of really stressed. And let's face it, these things happen. They're never convenient. So like when you're really sort of short staffed, that's like now there's you're working an incident or whatever. It's a horrible place to be.
Hmm.
And so I think we really have to figure out, how do we grow this? How do we get more and more great people interested? Because the opportunity and the careers and the way to help your career, help your profession, help your life,
Hmm.
they're all there. It's just that we got to get the right funneling of people to them. And for whatever reason, it's just not work. It's sort of that flywheel isn't
Hmm.
turning like it really needs to. So we've got to make progress there.
Absolutely, I agree. I think that a lot of these topics, I think they're all actionable. They're not things that it's not impossible. I think we can solve this as an industry. I think the more that we talk about it, the more we share the ideas, that I think really they'll pick it up. So, Kevin, it's been awesome having you on the show. We should definitely have this more often. I think definitely for the audience, listening to these topics, and really gives them, hopefully, some organizations out there listening will go and completely redefine their hiring process to really open it up further, to get
Yeah.
more choices, more people coming in, and ultimately it might find that the retention challenge and getting the right people and waiting for a long time to find those, is that they will go away, because if they make their organization attractive for investing in people and for those who want to learn, they will
Yeah.
become very
100%.
valuable.
Thanks for having me. And I would just leave people with this one
Mm.
question, which is, if you're out there, think about, all right, for the next dollar that I spend, or the next pound that I spend, what truly would help my organization the most? Is it investing in my people? What would really make a difference in retention, attraction, reducing risk, being capable, and maybe it is adding another piece of technology, because that could certainly be the case. But I'd also submit that for many organizations, I do believe that investing in developing your people would probably yield the best benefit. And that's not always the case, right? Sometimes you gotta deploy the tech, but I'd ask people to really consider that.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I think definitely automation is an important area there, where people who can take what they do and automate it, but
Yes.
that frees people get worried that that's replacing their job, but it's not. It's about
No.
allowing to go work in the things it gives them more time to learn.
Yeah,
It
I
gives
always
them
think
more
about,
time.
like,
Yeah.
what's the residual of what's left over after automation is
Hmm.
actually the harder stuff. Like
Yep.
those are the real challenges, and automation leaves a lot of residual hard stuff. So
Absolutely. You can't
that's where you need.
automate everything.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Joe, it's great. Thank you so much.
absolutely.
Hope everybody has a great day and gets something out of this.
Absolutely, for sure. So for the audience, it's been a pleasure having Kevin back on again. The conversations, discussions with Kevin is always hugely popular. So hopefully everyone enjoyed the show. Definitely make sure you go and subscribe, and so you can actually go and listen to some of the previous podcast episodes, and make sure that you actually keep up to date with the future ones that's coming, because we've got some great, really guests coming on in the upcoming shows. So stay tuned, subscribe, and again, tune every 2 weeks. 401 Access Denied, the podcast that really brings you really important topics that can be really significant changing in our industry. So stay safe, take care, and see you again soon. Thank you.